Okay, then this morning we will talk about the language policy, and in front of us we have the panel that will explain it to us. I'll keep the mic to Mr. and Dr. Raine to take it further. Mr.
Kumol, Kumol Kanji. Good morning to everyone. I think it's a good morning, right? Yes. Looks, it's not as hot, I hope. We're sitting under the shade. It's nice. Yesterday, many of the participants sat under the sun, so this is a bit of an improvement from yesterday. So we thank the facilities people that got this, the idea of putting the tents under this thing and make it possible for us to be here comfortably. So before we start, I'd like to introduce the panel that's up here. People who work with the Ministry of Education to pull together the revised bilingual policy. And on the far right is Wilbert Alec. He is the department chair for the Marshallese studies at, did I say it right? Marshallese studies at College of the Marshall Islands. So he's leading the Marshallese program here on the campus. Next to him is Dr. Robert Early, who comes from Vanuatu, but he was a member of the QPNP project under or funded by Asian Development Bank, and he was consulted by PSI, and he provided support to the project under that partnership. And then of course Marilyn Lowe from Pacific Resources for Education and Learning. She's been working with us for many years, and she provided also valuable support for the development of the policy. Then we have Teresa Kitchener, who is one of our language specialists, English language specialists, and Chida Anian, who is our Marshallese language specialist in the public school system. There were several other people, I'm not sure where they're at. I think Evelyn Joseph is somewhere. Evelyn, why don't you come up here? Where are you? Evelyn Joseph, who is a PREL Service Center person here, also was very influential in pulling together our revised policy. She's been working with PREL and with the public school system for many, many years, and is very familiar with the language policy. As is Anna Lapita in the back over there. Anna, why don't you stand up so people know you? Anna is Director of Curriculum and Instruction for the PSS. And of course, Kanchi was also part of the team. So we've been missing here is, or are members of our commission for customary law and language commission. We call them CLLC. Mr. Alfred Capelle and Dr. Alp are also part of this team. They too are part of CLLC, which has been moved to the college, and they are stationed, or they're part of the college, not in program-wise, they're independent, but are integrating their program to College of the Marshall Islands programming. So it's this team that worked together. We called them to help us. It was a call from the ministry, from the public school system, Ministry of Education. We asked that we revisit our language policy, which we've been using for over 20 years, I believe. And we were discontent with the outcome for our students, both in English and in Marshallese. We didn't feel that our students were excelling in either language. So we needed to do something about it. So therefore, we asked experts to help us review the policy and to start the process. So the important thing, I think, was to try to bring up Marshallese so that it's in equal place as far as teaching and learning in our classroom. Up to this point, I think we had a policy that was in place to really promote English and not necessarily promote martialese. So it was necessary to take a look at that, even though we know that English is essential for our children as they go to college and go into the world. We still feel that it's important for our children to know their language and to grow up with their language as part of the education process. So, so in the, I'm just going to talk. I think I'm not going to follow the handout as much as I probably should, but you can just go through that, and it gives you an idea of the purpose of this, why we move into this new policy, and then also the guiding principles that help us formulate the policy. So in short, I guess, the original policy was that we use martialese as the medium of instruction from first grade to, or from kindergarten to third grade. And then we began to slowly introduce English as medium of instruction from third grade all the way to, by the time the students are in sixth grade, I believe teachers were supposed to use English as the medium of instruction, and then continue all the way to secondary schools. So with the new policy, medium of instruction remains martialese from kindergarten all the way to sixth grade. It's a medium of instruction, but English is taught from kindergarten all the way to, of course, high school. But use of martialese, and then also martialese language is also taught from kindergarten all the way. In the new policy all the way to high school. Of course, we're not there yet because we're still working on developing materials to implement the policy. But that's the major change or shift in the old policy to the new policy, is the language used in classrooms. I think it was important to do that. Number one, of course, our children come with the martialese language. That's the mother tongue that they come with and they understand, they converse with. Also, our teachers are more comfortable in using martialese than in using English. And so I think we think that they would become better teachers when they're comfortable teaching the children in the mother tongue. So this is the policy at the primary level, and then when we move to 8th grade and beyond, then the equal sharing of the two languages as medium of instruction takes place. So half of the time teachers are supposed to use martialese and half-time English from 8th grade. From 8th, yes. Is it from 8th grade on? From 7th grade on, I'm sorry. So that's the basic policy in short. So there is a chart in there that gives you a language of instruction distribution. You can read it yourself, and if you have a question, I'm sure a lot of our folks up here will be able to respond to any questions. But in the process of developing this, we did a lot of consultation and community meetings with people to get their input into the changes that we were proposing. So we had one workshop with a lot of teachers that Dr. Early and Marilyn conducted to get a sense from our teachers as to what might be a good idea. Maybe I'll ask them to talk a little bit about that. Also, in addition to that, here in this very same place, the CLLC conducted what we call a Ledo Datang Malele in November of 2013 to get community input again into the policy that we were developing. So we had a lot of input into this as we were moving forward. So we have a public sense of what might be acceptable in terms of our policy. So once all of this was in place and everybody was comfortable, then we took this proposed policy to our Board of Education in, I believe, November of last year. And so they reviewed it, and then after they reviewed and gave us their approval, then we took it to 30-day public comment process. So the public had an opportunity to listen or to review and give us their comments before we finalized the policy as is, and board approved it in early part of this year. So we still have a lot of ways to go in terms of getting our teachers on board. I think there are some who are familiar or aware of this policy, and many still yet to be made aware. So it's an ongoing process that we need to do from here on, working with our teachers to make sure they understand how to implement this or what does this look like in the classroom. And then secondly is also teacher training, and this is where the college comes in terms of preparing our teachers to use this new policy. And as well as materials development, there's a lot of need to develop materials. We have a number of materials that have been developed, and we are thankful to all the supports that have been given to us to develop some of these materials, but it's not nearly enough, and especially at the secondary level. We're finding that we don't have enough materials that actually express, that use the academic Marshallese language. So we need to spend a lot of time developing that, and also working our secondary teachers to be able to teach the language appropriately at that level. So I guess I'll stop here. That's kind of our, that's the introduction to this. And then I'll ask Robert and Marilyn to talk about, their sense of what happened. And then, of course, we'll ask Wilbert to talk about what the college is doing to try to implement the policy. And then we'll have our Ministry of Education or public school system staff talk about their role in this policy development. Thank you all.
Yakwe, good morning, everyone. I'm going to ask you to turn to page 2, and I just want to review a little bit of the structure of the new policy. So often when we talk about language education policy, we get confused about the idea that a language needs to be learned, so that's a subject of study, and a language that is used as a medium of instruction. And those are two distinct and very different aspects of a language policy. So when you look at the chart at the bottom of page 2, you'll see two running columns, one for English language arts and one for Marshallese language arts. This is where the language is studied. This is where students gain knowledge and understanding of how their language works, the language that they're learning. So when we talk about learning in school, there is a certain kind of language that is associated with school, and it's different from the language of home, the language of community, the language of church. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And so while they may be native speakers of Marshallese, learning the language of school in Marshallese is different, and we need to give attention to that. Similarly for English. English is a new language. They hear some English in their community, but it's not the language of home for most of the students. So it's a new language, and we have to give special attention to that. They need to learn the vocabulary of that language. They need to learn the structure of that language. They need to learn how it differs from Marshallese and what is similar. Where there are similarities, they're both alphabetic languages, there's high transfer, or at least higher transfer of knowledge of how language works. But where there are differences, and there are significant differences between Marshallese and English, as teachers, we need to teach to that explicitly. And it happens in the language arts classroom. Okay, that's not all that language arts does. Because language arts is also a subject where we learn literature, we learn to be journalists, we learn to express ourselves in many different ways. And this is where language is learned. In the other subject areas, of course, language is used as the primary means of communication and learning. It's not the only means. We use visual and other semiotic processes. But primarily language in school as it exists today is the main means of learning. So the language that we learn in the medium of instruction is carried through in various course offerings, subject areas. And in those subject areas, each subject has its own way of communicating. So if you think about mathematics, many of us are second language mathematic learners because the language of math can be very unique unto itself. There are many words in math that don't exist anywhere else, or not used anywhere else, and they're used in special ways. So take the word volume in English. We can turn up the volume, but that's not what math is talking about. Math is very specific in terms of what it means by volume. So vocabulary becomes really important. And finding the terms to express ideas and constructs in Marshallese is critical in understanding those concepts, especially if they are a Western concept that's being introduced into the Marshallese context. We need to find ways to express those ideas in Marshallese. There are also concepts in Marshallese that don't exist in English, and we need to find ways to understand those concepts in English. That's what a bilingual program is all about. So what I wanted you to really understand about this this new initiative, and I stand proudly with the ministry in what they're trying to accomplish, is that both languages play a really important role, and they feed off each other. So it's not just about Marshallese in one situation and English in another, but the more they understand about their own language, the more they're going to be able to learn in English, and the more they understand about English, it's going to have them reflect on their first language, and that will deepen their understanding there. We also know we have many children who have more than 2 languages in their repertoire, and that we want to honor as well. So there are opportunities when the medium of instruction is, for example, Marshallese, that English may need to be used, or another language, to deepen the understanding of a construct or a concept. And teachers need to help students help recognize that students come to them with all of these assets that learning needs to benefit from. So we need to recognize who our students are, the languages they speak, and really build on those assets. In the Marshallese medium classroom, there's opportunities to bring in those other languages. In English, there's opportunities to bring in Marshallese, but it has to be done in a structured and thoughtful way. But sometimes I hear, we have a bilingual program, teachers can use whatever language they want. It's not really going to get you to the goals of bilingualism by the end of grade 12. So this structure becomes really important, and this is what we have to support teachers in understanding and implementing. And you'll hear more about that shortly.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Robert, and I work with the University of the South Pacific, based in Vanuatu. But being involved in this project has given me a wonderful opportunity to come to Micronesia. I'm going to start with 2 short stories. First one. The first time I came to the Marshall Islands was about 10 years ago to do something with USP. I walked up and down the streets here of Majuro, going to almost every store, looking for something that was printed in the Marshallese language. I could hardly find anything. So that was one of my first impressions of coming to the Marshall Islands, was that the Marshallese language did not seem to be valued as a tool of literacy, of public language use, and so on. There's a few signs around, but to actually find books, materials that were written in the Marshallese language that were on sale in stores around town, there was almost nothing. The second story is when I was flying here for this conference now, I sat on the plane next to a Guamanian fellow who works for the US military, and he's here in Madro this week on a recruitment campaign. He's recruiting for the US Army. So, for good or for bad, for better or for worse, whatever we think about it, he told me that there are hundreds of young people in this island today, this week, who are applying for recruitment into the US military. And the same all through FSM and the rest of Micronesia, as you all know much better than I do. But what was interesting, I asked, well, what do you do? They have a test, and a lot of it is English language. And he told me that in most of the Micronesian states that they go to, it's something like in the vicinity of about 5% of the young people who apply who get through the English language requirement that you need to join the US military. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it stops a lot of people from joining the military. But obviously it's something that a lot of young people want to do, but they don't have the English language skills to get there. And this is obviously one area of potential employment for a lot of people. It's value. So that reminds us again of the value of English. So following on from what Marilyn has been saying about bilingualism, we can see that, we need to strengthen both languages. Both languages in every area of their usage need to be strengthened in our communities. And that's why it's been a wonderful privilege for me to participate in this process, a little bit from the sidelines, but supporting Minister Heine and her people as they've gone through this process of language policy formulation. And I just want to say, I want to congratulate them for it, but also to say that this is really going in the direction of, where international best practice is now taking us. There are other countries in the South Pacific that are going through the same kind of process. So if you're sitting there thinking and wondering, saying, is Marshall's going out on a limb here? Are they trying to do something that's never been tried before? Or are they doing something that may not work? No. This is really the direction that internationally we now understand is the best kind of way to be going for our younger generation to grow up as fully competent bilinguals in their mother tongue and in the international language that they need. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but a lot of people like turning to the last chapter in the book, right? When you're reading a story, you always go and see what happens right at the end. Well, have a look. What's the very last line that you can see on your handout? On the last page, the last line. And this is where I'm going to stop, but this is the key factor for me in this, because what we've gone through here is this wonderful process of community engagement, community awareness, getting stakeholders, people involved in this process of policy formulation. And of course, one of the major hurdles that has to be overcome is that for a lot of people in our communities, when they see the kind of policy that we've just worked through that Marilyn has explained, when they see it, they react negatively towards it, right? Now, why do they react negatively towards it? Because they are fearful that the inclusion of the first language to this extent in education is going to negatively impact the outcomes in English, right? And that's the biggest single factor in most people's minds when we talk about bilingual education. We talk about introducing the first language, the mother tongue, into the curriculum to the level that it is in this policy. The reaction that we get so often, and even from within the educational fraternities or establishments in countries, people are saying you can't have that much of the local language in the program. If you do, it's going to impact negatively on the outcomes in English. And we have to work very hard to overcome that wrong idea. And we congratulate again the Ministry of Education here because they did engage in a strong process of community consultation, and we tried to assist where we could to help people understand that, again, internationally, what we know is that when you build the strong foundation in the first language, you get better outcomes in the second language. So if you want to focus on your kids becoming proficient in English, the best way to get there is not to only teach English, but the best way to get there is to work through the resource of their own first language. You build that, and then the English goes alongside it, and Marilyn talked about them working together. There's a synergy, and you get better outcomes in both languages. So it's an absolute win-win situation. So again, you can see the policy framework is there. But I'm going back again to my last point, or the last sentence on the page, material development in Marshallese to accelerate pace. That's where the implementational hurdle really exists. How do we engage in this process of developing the resources, the printed language resources that our languages need, both for education from basic primary levels all the way through the secondary system, and then into the wider language use in the community. So I think you will see that there are some wonderful resources being produced in the Marshallese language, but in terms of implementation, that's a huge area, and I think all of us need to commit ourselves to supporting the development of materials, all kinds of materials, in our local languages throughout the Pacific region. Thank you.
Ora tenanel kamulo cemerilang pencon cipungone mana maibu. Delarir yare menanci agati kamulo lenganan marok kautuk kayu. Before I proceed, I want to start off with a little bit of a historical background in terms of the Marshallese Studies program at CMI. For 21 years, we've been offering Marshallese classes, but we've never been able to produce a department housed in an academic department. And just recently, May this year, spring 15, the Board of Regents officially established the Marshallese Studies Department. In support of the language, we also created 2 certificate programs that will, in our hopes, support the language in terms of implementation. One of the certificate programs is the Marshallese Language Arts, which focuses primarily on language. That's where we've created 4 new Marshallese courses, 2 of them which serve in the other certificate program, which is the Marshallese Social Studies. And the Social Studies certificate program focuses on social studies, history, government, whatnot. So in these 2 certificate programs, they got different combinations of different courses. For the MLA, the Marshallese Language Arts, we also have education classes that are also integrated into the certificate. And that's where our teachers get to the classes to be able to learn how to teach Marshallese. So by the time they come to take the Marshallese classes, which the language medium is Marshallese, they get to learn more about Marshallese and they take it with them to the schools. As to the social studies, there is also a different combination of courses in there. I think that's pretty much it in terms of the CMI side. Oh, in partnership with other partnering entities, there's the 3+1 program under the education department here, which is in partnership with USB. And there's also articulation arguments in process to be partnered with UMFK. That's the main Fort Bend University. I think that's pretty much it from the Marshallese Studies side. interesting, we also have, I've been hearing a lot of materials development. Over the summer semester, my students in the culture class um, have also, we've worked hard to produce some materials. There's not a lot, there's only about 5 booklets, which are mostly focused on the traditional food sources. We don't have enough for printout, but we will be putting them out and sending them out soon. So they are mostly focused on the local plants, including fish, and in them they give a variety of information as to seasons, whatnot. And I think I should have mentioned this, but as we create the classes, we try to be very careful in terms of the learning outcomes and how we can come up with exciting and very cool assignments where our students will feel comfortable in terms of number one, producing materials, and number two, using the language and learning it. So as we go along the way, it's still in our future plan to create more classes to hopefully be able to offer an associate's program in martial arts studies. I think that's pretty much it from the martial arts studies and so more.
While we're still talking about resources, I just wanted to encourage all of the service providers to think about ways that they can contribute to this initiative, for those that are working here in the Marshall Islands. I just wanted to share one quick example. So in one project where we're really focused on climate education and wanting students to know their environment, we've developed this rather simple poster through the great support of IREI, and Duncan who's here with us. So many of you may know of the incredible resources that they produce. There are books that go with this. Unfortunately, they're in English still, but can be done in Marshallese. But a very simple way of helping kids know their environment and doing it in their local language. So we have produced these in Marshallese. There are many other languages. So I see Lorenzo is here from Yap, and we actually have produced them in the 4 languages, in local languages in Yap. And all I want to do is just to encourage those of you who have the opportunity to develop some resources and are working throughout the region where bilingualism is an important outcome for education, that you consider developing those resources both in English, if that's the first language that you're using, for the resources, but to also make sure that you include a local language.
Thank you. I think Wilbert forgot to mention that they're also developing a dictionary or spell check or something online that the college has, so we can bring our computers to them and they, whatever, fix your computer so you can do spell checks and some other fancy stuff like spelling. So we want to thank the college for their role, especially very important for teacher development, teacher training. Unfortunately, the CLLC people are not here today, but they're also a very important resource to the whole process. They bring in the local knowledge, the local experts, and by staying right on the campus, they're able to share their knowledge with the college students. And that's what we wanted to do by relocating CLLC to the campus, so that it becomes a living, their work becomes, can continue with the younger generations, students of the college. So I think I want to now turn over to our PSS staff to share a little bit. I know we have maybe 15 minutes left and we want to give some time for questions. So I'm going to ask them to be a little bit brief on the implementation plan that we have. So I'll ask, I'm not sure who's talking, you and Lisa. And then.
Good morning. There was a lot of thinking that went into how we're going to implement the language policy. I mean, where do we start? How do we start? So with the help of PREL, we came up with 6 priority areas that we needed to tackle. And the first one was to, as much as possible, make sure that every teacher in the Marshalls and everybody knows about the language policy. And the second one was the one with Micronesian studies, that make sure that all the teachers go through the go through that program through the Marshallese study, so they have at least a certificate so they can teach in the classroom. The other one is the employment of local knowledge, which is also very important. Before we lose it, we want to record it. So that was also one of our priority areas. Bilingual resources, that was the biggest hurdle. We didn't have anything in Marshallese above 5th grade, I believe. So that's something that's ongoing, and we're still working on it. We cannot do all this without money. So yeah, we're trying to, as much as possible, write as many grants as we possibly can, so we can get some money to implement this new language policy. And the last one is not only to implement this, but we wanted to know what is the impact. So we wanted help from PREL or any experts willing to help, so they can come around and check what is the progress. Are we moving forward? Are we moving backwards? And what do we need to change in order to go forth from there? And these are the priority areas that we came up with, and I know there are more that needs to be done, and we're getting there. We're getting there. Thank you. The remaining minutes, we can take a few questions. If anyone has a question, please raise your hands and we'll try to respond.
Can you tell us a little bit about the implementation for the first priority, about letting all of the teachers know about the policy? How's that going, and what strategies have you used so far?
For that one, we've been conducting workshops at the school. Same PowerPoint as you're seeing up here. And we try to keep it the same PowerPoint, so the same information that goes out, even though it's 5 different teams, we're going out with the same information. So on trips to the outer islands, we take it along with us and disseminate as much as possible. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, any of us are happy to respond individually to anybody who would like to speak to us about what's going on and what's been happening, some of our challenges as well as successes as we begin the process of implementing this new language policy. Thank you all. I think we have about 10 minutes before the next session, so good timing to make your way to the next session. There are a few announcements before we break. Thank you all for your attention.
Few announcements. First, I would like to thank all the schools for hosting the entities dinners, and I hope we had fun mingling with the Marshallese at their schools, the Marshallese teachers, and getting to know your colleagues in this wide Pacific Ocean. For the dinner this evening is at Chitak, and that's hosted by the president. If you go on the road towards ICC, where we had the opening ceremony, on the left side of the road is it's the only graveyard that you will see on the left side, and right across it is the location for the Chitak area where the dinner will be. And we will try to put a sign right by the road, the name of the place. There's actually a name over there, but we'll try also to put a post near the road so that you can get there. Those who are driving by themselves, but the buses should be able to take you there. And then changes, or just repeating on the changes for the presentations. Presentation number 105 is climate change science, ocean acidification and pH. and that's in room TH 102 this morning from 9 to 10:25 with Lorraine Talay. Okay? And then number 73 is Power School, and that's in RH 205 this afternoon from 2 to 3:25 with Junior Paul and 3 other colleagues of his. Those are the announcements for this morning. So have a good day, everybody. If there's any needs, please let us know. You'll see us walking around. So let us know. Come on.